I do have a follow up
Sure.
just to go back to what would people be podcasting about 500 years ago? I imagine one of the big topics would be like anti like Pope stuff. On the Protestant, we got a lot of anti-Pope stuff, and then probably a lot of anti-Ottoman Empire podcast. Those would be two really popular subjects.
Yeah.
Imagine the divisiveness between, like, like in Germany, between Catholics and Protestants, like how divisive the podcasting scene would be.
Oh, I'm going to throw this into ChatGPT. That sounds like a fun prompt. Give me a podcast episode that would have been recorded 500 years ago, right?
500 years ago is what, 1624? So
yeah, right in the 30-year war.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh my God, it would be the 30-year war.
Yeah. Right in like the fourth phase of the 30-year war.
Yeah, I'm not trying to remember my history, and you'd probably still have some. While I'm not going to try and speculate because I'll get my dates all wrong. I was going to say something about people be debating about whether Gutenberg is a good thing or not. What is the printing press going to do for us? But I think I'm off by about 100 years on that.
I think
all right,
so.
Give me some plausible podcast.
About 500 years ago, it was like the final, because the 30-year war was in 3 stages. There was like the beginning stage of when it was just like a regional German war, and then it turned into like a more regional war with Denmark and then Sweden, and then France entered the war, but they were on the side of the Protestants, and it was just like, it was a lot like how we've made the comparison before that the religious wars 500 years ago are very similar to the religious wars that took place in the Middle East about 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, hey, I mean, I just, do you guys know Danny Davis, retired lieutenant colonel?
Yes, I know of him.
Yeah, so Danny was saying the other day, specifically about the 30-year war. He said, I remember, learning about that, and I was a kid in school, and just thinking, how stupid. How could anybody fight for 30 years? How stupid. And then having the realization of, like, that's exactly what my whole adult life has been.
Yeah.
This has been... however you want to phrase it, but you look at just that the world war that the United States has executed from Western Africa through Pakistan for the last 30 years, my entire adult life, right? I mean, so yeah, we have been in like a 30 years war, and it can break down, as you were saying, Henry, along the lines of religious or ethnic, or so it's yeah, I mean, the podcast, podcasting back then would have done pretty well.
It's interesting that you say that, because I was thinking about that yesterday. We are kind of in a world war, but it's a different kind of world war where it's like suns, like stars in general, right? The bigger they are, the quicker they explode, right? On a cosmic scale, right? Very large sun, very hot war. It ends very quickly, but this has been kind of like a slower burn over a longer period of time, but it is indeed a world war, right? The whole world has been at war in some capacity.
Oh, I mean, just in a sense of, from an American perspective, or people looking at America, maybe better way to describe it. There has been no part of the Muslim world, particularly, that has been untouched by the United States military in the last 30 years. With very few exceptions. I'd be struggling to think of even nations like Morocco. Certainly, what you have happening with Western Sahara. You can tie all this into this, but that's where we had a lot of our black sites. Like that type of crossover as well. So even if it wasn't direct U.S. military killing people on the ground, there was that presence in their own government's actions that were tied to it. Directly, I mean, so it certainly, I mean, if just think about it, from the west coast of Africa all the way to Pakistan, like, just who has not been touched by the American military in some way, or our proxies haven't been devastated by it. It's hard to think of a nation that hasn't. I mean, Jordan comes to mind to a degree, but even then, I remember they had some terrible suicide bombings in Amman in the early days of the Iraq War, the first couple of years of the Iraq War, as well as just all other aspects of it. But yeah.
Well, let's talk about the I guess, the most pressing topic. So I'm having a hard time kind of figuring out what happened with these pager bombs or these cell phone bombs. What is your do you have any insight into like what that operation was, like what the Mossad was thinking, if it was some master plan? Because what I see on the internet is all like, oh man, the Mossad is so badass, like they just pulled out like the greatest attack, the most sophisticated attack ever. The Mossad is back. That's what I'm hearing a lot online. I want to hear, I guess, what your take is on it.
That's certainly part of it. That's one of them. That's maybe the most successful aspect of that operation is you had the Hollywood tale of it. You had the American press and the American politicians going crazy over it, right? I mean, John Fetterman celebrating it on Twitter. So that was a huge part of it, I believe, was the information operations of the Mossad and of Israel to continue the mythology of Israel. Certainly people are familiar with, I remember 20 years ago, the film Munich. There are all other types of films that display the competence and the aptitude and the righteousness of the Israeli intelligence services. Certainly, whether it's like the HBO series, which I've not seen, Tehran, but also there's other ones as well. I'm blanking on the one that is very popular. But anyway, certainly that was part of it, Henry. I mean, this idea of promoting the narrative, the mythology of Israel in the West. So the political is, people have to remember, you go back to your Clausewitz, right? And you have tactical, operational, strategic, and political levels of warfare. And that is the way it ascends. They ascend in importance. And the political is the most important. A lot of people don't like that. They want the strategy to be the most important, right? They want the big arrow movements or the decisions by the generals to be the most important things, the battlefield successes or losses to be the most important things. But ultimately, it comes down to the political decisions that are made or the political consequences of those tactical, operational, or strategic actions. So, I mean, certainly there was that. And I would have to believe that there was an element of the planning in this that where they expected to have this type of reaction, they'd be able to sell it as this targeted counter-terror operation that only hurt Hezbollah terrorists. And of course, that's not what happened at all. Right. The scale and scope of this is, to be fair, to be objective here, is impressive. I mean, you got to give credit where credit is due, right? I mean, in the sense that this was a very clever and also very well prepared attack. We'll know more in the future about it. And of course, we have to be careful about what we think we know because the Israelis are so good about telling us what we think we know. We certainly saw that go back to July when Ismail Haniyeh is killed in Tehran. And the New York Times, right out of the gate, has this story that's sourced with 6 different sources, et cetera, about how the Mossad got a bomb put into this Iranian safe house months ago, and that story was bogus. That was a planted story to try and further, the information operations involved in Haniyeh's assassination, including trying to sow concern and consternation and tension within the Iranians themselves. How did they get a bomb in here? No, they didn't. They shot a missile at it. That's what they did. So we got to be careful with what we think we know. But that said, what we think we know is that the Israelis, years ago it must have been, started front companies in Eastern Europe, Hungary and Bulgaria.
BAC Consulting, what it was called.
Right. And that they had to have established, if not manufacturing capacities, because what I understand now is that the manufacturer of these pagers shipped them from Taiwan, and then they were reassembled in Eastern Europe, repackaged, and then distributed.
Golden Apollo would be the name of that company.
That's right. But and we'll get to the walkie-talkies in a second. But the idea being is that, okay, how did they get about then selling these pagers to Hezbollah? They must have had other operations preceding this to build up their trust, right? To build a customer base,
sales organization.
That's exactly right. So when you start like pulling this back, what they must have what they had to do to get this, it is really impressive.